Mr. Johnson sat quietly on his porch that warm evening, a glass of sweet tea resting in his hand. The old wooden chair creaked softly under his weight as he leaned back, letting the cool evening breeze touch his face. His eyes traveled across the neat rows of houses, their white fences and trimmed lawns glowing under the last rays of the setting sun. From the outside, the neighborhood looked peaceful. Children had already gone inside. Porch lights clicked on one by one and the street was calm. But inside Mr. Johnson's heart, there was no calm. He had lived 68 years, working harder than most men ever would. He grew up in a world where every step forward felt like a fight. He worked 2 jobs at once, saved every dollar, and carried heavy burdens without complaint. When the day finally came that he signed the papers for this house, he thought he had won his battle. To him, the house was not just shelter. It was his pride. It was the proof that his struggles had meaning. Yet from the day he moved in, he felt the stares. Some neighbors would not return his greetings. Some whispered when he passed by. Others left notes about his grass being too long, even though it looked no different from theirs. The neighborhood had rules, yes, but sometimes it felt like the rules were made only for him. Still, Mr. Johnson tried to ignore it. He believed if he kept his head high and his heart steady, things would get better. This evening, however, something felt different. The air felt heavier. He did not know why, but there was a strange silence that made him uneasy. He looked at the empty street, the rows of cars parked neatly, the flags waving gently in the breeze. He shook his head, telling himself it was nothing. He took another sip of his tea, trying to let the sweetness calm his nerves. Inside the house, faint footsteps moved across the hallway. His son Marcus was home. Marcus had returned just 2 weeks ago after many years of serving in the Navy. Mr. Johnson had not seen him much during those years, but now, every day he felt grateful his boy had come back safe. Marcus was different now, quieter, stronger, carrying a presence that could not be hidden. When he walked into a room, people felt it. Even in silence, he carried the weight of discipline and courage. Mr. Johnson smiled softly when he thought of his son. It gave him comfort to know Marcus was there. For years, Mr. Johnson had fought his battles alone, but now at least he was not completely by himself. As he rocked slowly in his chair, his thoughts drifted to the past, days of struggle, moments of pain, nights of prayer. He remembered being a young man, told where he could and could not go. He remembered working extra shifts because promotions passed him by. He remembered holding his newborn son in his arms and promising that he would give him a better life no matter what. And in many ways he had kept that promise, but despite all that he had built, the shadow of judgment never left. It followed him like a quiet echo. Every stare, every cold word from neighbors reminded him that some people still saw him as less. He often wondered if things would ever change, or if he would spend his last years fighting the same old battles he had fought in his youth. The sound of crickets grew louder as the sun sank behind the rooftops. Streetlights flickered on, painting the road in a dim orange glow. Mr. Johnson sighed and rubbed his tired eyes. He whispered softly to himself, "Lord, give me strength. I've carried enough weight in this life." And just as he spoke those words, he heard the crunch of footsteps on his driveway. Slow, heavy, intentional. 2 shadows moved toward him. Breaking the calm of the night, Mr. Johnson sat up straighter, his hand tightening around the glass of tea. His heart beat faster. Something told him this was not a friendly visit. The first shadow reached the bottom of the steps, stopping just a few feet from Mr. Johnson. He could see them now, 2 men dressed in dark uniforms with shiny badges pinned to their chests. Their hats were low, hiding their eyes, but their posture was aggressive, confident, as if they owned the street. They were not familiar faces, but they moved like they had every right to be here. "Evening, sir," the taller one said, his voice sharp and loud, cutting through the quiet of the neighborhood. "We're here on official HOA business. There have been complaints." Mr. Johnson felt his chest tighten. He had faced stares, whispers, letters, and subtle threats, but the words spoken out loud with that tone brought a different kind of fear. His hands, once steady, clenched slightly around his chair. He stood slowly, taking in the men. "Complaints? About what?" he asked, his voice calm but wary. The shorter man stepped closer, leaning slightly forward as if trying to intimidate him. "Your lawn, your fence, your porch. It doesn't meet community standards. We're here to make sure you comply. You need to understand that ignoring rules has consequences. Mr. Johnson's lips pressed together. He had always kept his property neat. The grass was trimmed, the porch clean, the fence freshly painted. He knew this was not about rules. He knew what this was. A test, an attempt to make him feel small, to remind him that in some people's eyes he didn't belong. He had felt that pain all his life. But tonight something inside him stirred differently. He did not feel powerless. He had survived every challenge before. He had worked harder than anyone around him, faced prejudice, fought for respect, and most importantly, he had his son. He straightened his back, his eyes meeting theirs evenly. "I think you've made a mistake," he said softly. "I've followed every rule. You are not the real HOA." The men exchanged a quick glance. They didn't like being challenged. The taller one smirked, trying to regain control. "We know what we're doing. We have authority here. You need to listen." Mr. Johnson's hands clenched into fists for a brief second, then relaxed. He looked at the street, at the empty houses, and remembered the years of struggle he had endured. He remembered the times people tried to intimidate him, to make him doubt himself, to push him out. He would not let them do it again. Not tonight. Then a sound came from inside the house. A door opened quietly, and a presence entered the frame behind him. Marcus, his son, stood there. Even in the dim light, his posture radiated discipline and strength. His Navy SEAL training showed in the way he held himself, calm, alert, ready for anything. "Is there a problem?" Marcus asked, his voice low, but it carried an undeniable authority. The tone was not angry, but it was commanding. It filled the space between the men and the porch. The two intruders froze for a moment. They had expected an old man who might argue or stay quiet. Not a tall, broad-shouldered son with eyes that seemed to see through them. The confidence in Marcus's stance pressed down on them like a weight they weren't prepared to bear. The taller man tried to laugh it off, but it came out as a nervous cough. "We're just here to remind your father of the rules." Marcus didn't move. His gaze never wavered. "Rules?" he said slowly, each word deliberate. "Or intimidation?" The shorter man shifted on his feet. The words felt heavier than anything Mr. Johnson had heard in years. These were not just men with paper and badges. They were trying to make them feel small, trying to take control through fear. But standing there with his son behind him, Mr. Johnson felt a sense of calm wash over him. He was not alone. Not now. The sun had disappeared completely, and the streetlights cast long shadows across the driveway. The quiet of the evening seemed to amplify the tension. It was no longer just a knock on the door, it was a confrontation. And in that moment, Mr. Johnson realized something powerful. Fear could never defeat courage, and intimidation could never stand against honor. Marcus Johnson stepped fully onto the porch, his presence filling the small space with an unspoken authority. Even in the dim light of the street lamps, it was clear he was not a man to be underestimated. Years in the Navy, and more specifically as a SEAL, had shaped him into someone whose very posture spoke of discipline, courage, and the willingness to protect what he loved. But tonight he wasn't just protecting a mission or a country, he was protecting his father. "Is there a problem?" Marcus repeated, his voice calm yet firm. He did not need to raise it. The words themselves carried power. The two men in fake uniforms froze again, their previous confidence slipping like sand through fingers. They had planned to intimidate an elderly man, to make him feel small, to pressure him with fake authority. They had not expected a Navy SEAL to answer the door. The taller one cleared his throat, shifting his weight nervously. We're just here to make sure your father follows the HOA rules. We've had complaints about his lawn, his fence, his porch." His voice trailed off as he tried to sound convincing. Marcus's eyes narrowed slightly. "Complaints? From who?" His tone was calm, but each word carried a subtle warning. "And why are you dressed like police officers when the HOA doesn't even have enforcement authority? Who sent you here?" The men looked at each other, their eyes darting nervously. They hadn't rehearsed answers for this. Their plan was intimidation, not confrontation. But here, on this quiet suburban porch, their small scheme began to crumble. Mr. Johnson watched from behind Marcus, his chest swelling with pride. For years he had carried the weight of judgment, prejudice, and subtle threats. Tonight, however, he felt a strange comfort. Seeing his son stand so strong, so unyielding, reminded him that he was not alone. For the first time in a long time, he felt protected. Marcus took a step forward, subtly closing the distance. The men flinched. realizing that the calmness in his body was not weakness but control. "You came here to scare my father," Marcus said quietly. "You wanted to make him doubt himself. But that ends now." The shorter man tried to laugh nervously. "We're just doing our job." "You don't understand." Marcus shook his head slowly. "No, I understand perfectly. You came here pretending to have power. You came here to intimidate an old man because you thought it would be easy. But you picked the wrong house, the wrong father, and the wrong son." The taller man swallowed hard. He looked around as if searching for a way to escape without losing face. But the street was quiet. The night held its breath as if watching the confrontation unfold. Even the breeze seemed to pause, rustling leaves softly in the silence. Marcus turned slightly toward his father. "Dad," he said, "you've carried enough weight all your life. Let me handle this." His voice was gentle but resolute, a mix of love and steel. Mr. Johnson felt his throat tighten. His son had returned from dangerous missions across the world, but here, tonight, he was fighting the same battles his father had faced for decades, only now with the strength of a trained protector by his side. The men tried to regain composure, but their body language betrayed them. Their fake badges, the uniforms, the confidence, they were all just illusions. Marcus didn't need to raise his voice or make threats. His mere presence and quiet authority were enough to make them doubt everything they thought they controlled. "You have two choices," Marcus continued, each word measured and deliberate. "Leave now, or face consequences for impersonation and harassment. It's your decision. But make no mistake, you will not intimidate my father, not here. Not ever." The taller man's lips parted, but no words came. The shorter one swallowed, glanced at his partner, and finally took a small step backward. Fear had replaced arrogance. Their plan had collapsed under a calm, powerful truth. Mr. Johnson watched, his chest rising and falling with pride and relief. He could not have imagined a more perfect moment, seeing his son, standing firm, defending not only him but their dignity, their honor, and their home. The night seemed to stretch as the fake officers hesitated, caught between retreat and confrontation. But in that pause, the balance of power was clear. Marcus's calm, unwavering stance had shifted everything. And for Mr. Johnson, it was a quiet, emotional reminder that strength and courage could take many forms, and that love, above all, was always the most powerful shield. The tension on the porch was thick enough to cut through. The two men in fake uniforms shifted uncomfortably, realizing the situation was no longer in their control. Their plan had been simple. Intimidate an elderly man into compliance, maybe get him flustered, make him feel small. But standing before them now was Marcus Johnson, a man whose calm presence and quiet strength made their confidence evaporate. Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Every inch of him radiated authority. His shoulders were squared, his gaze steady. He was not angry, but his aura told the intruders that he was ready to act if necessary. He didn't have to threaten. They could sense the discipline, the training, and the readiness in every subtle movement. "You think you can scare my father?" Marcus asked, his voice low but clear. "You came here thinking this would be easy, that an old man could be frightened into submission. But you underestimated him, and you underestimated me." The taller man's smirk faltered. He shifted from foot to foot, trying to regain the upper hand. We're just enforcing rules," he said, though his words sounded hollow even to him. The badge on his chest glinted in the porch light, but it was meaningless here. Marcus saw through it instantly. "You're not enforcing anything," Marcus said, stepping slightly closer. "You're pretending to be something you're not. You're hiding behind fake authority to bully someone who has done nothing wrong. That stops tonight." Mr. Johnson watched silently from behind Marcus, his heart pounding, pride and fear intertwined inside him. He had faced prejudice his entire life, seen how the world could try to push him down. But tonight his son was standing as his shield. He felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes, tears of relief, gratitude, and love. The shorter man cleared his throat nervously. "Sir, you don't understand. We're just—" Marcus's eyes snapped to him. "No, I understand perfectly. You came here to intimidate. You came here to make my father doubt himself. You thought he would be alone. But you're wrong. You have no idea who you're dealing with." The men looked at each other, panic slowly replacing the arrogance they had carried in their steps. They had rehearsed intimidation, but they hadn't rehearsed truth, courage, or discipline. They hadn't rehearsed standing against someone who refused to be afraid. Marcus's voice softened slightly, a mix of authority and care. Dad has carried burdens you can't imagine. He's fought battles you can't even comprehend. And for what? So you can feel powerful for 5 minutes? You picked the wrong house, the wrong family, and the wrong man to mess with. A cold wind blew down the street, rustling leaves and carrying the quiet tension of the night. The intruders swallowed nervously. Their fake uniforms and badges suddenly felt meaningless. Marcus's calm presence was enough to unmask their fear. Every step, every word of his radiated certainty. "You need to leave," Marcus said firmly. "And if you ever try this again, pretending to be something you're not, trying to bully my father, you'll answer to the real authorities. Do you understand?" The taller man's jaw tightened, and he glanced at his partner. The fake bravado that had brought them here was gone. Their faces, once bold, were now pale. Slowly, almost hesitantly, they stepped backward, their eyes avoiding Marcus's steady gaze. Mr. Johnson felt a lump in his throat. He had never felt safer, never felt prouder. His son had transformed fear into courage, intimidation into truth, and he had done it with calm, unwavering strength. The two men, once bold and threatening, were now just shadows in the dim streetlight, retreating into nothingness. Marcus turned to his father and offered a small, reassuring smile. "It's over, Dad," he said quietly. "You don't have to face them alone anymore." Mr. Johnson nodded, his throat tight with emotion. He placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "Son, all my life I fought to be seen as a man. Tonight you reminded me that I'm never alone. That strength isn't just in muscles or weapons, it's in heart, in courage and in love." The night returned to its quiet calm, but the porch, the house, and the hearts of father and son had changed forever. No threat, no fake badge, no intimidation could ever shake them again. They had faced fear together, and the bond between them had only grown stronger. The two men stumbled backward down the driveway, their fake confidence shattered. As they disappeared into the shadows of the quiet street, Mr. Johnson let out a deep breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The porch, once filled with tension, now felt like a sanctuary. His eyes met his son's, and he could see the same mix of relief, pride, and love reflected there. "Dad," Marcus said softly, placing a firm hand on his father's shoulder. "They won't come back. Not like that. They know we're serious. They know you are not someone to be messed with." Mr. Johnson's throat tightened, and he struggled to find words. All his life he had carried a quiet strength, fighting battles silently while others ignored or dismissed him. He had endured the whispers, the sideways glances, the subtle reminders that some people still didn't see him as equal. And yet here he was, standing with his son, feeling a sense of power he had almost forgotten. "Marcus, all these years," he whispered, "I fought so many battles alone. I tried to prove myself every day. And tonight you reminded me that I am never alone." Marcus smiled gently, his eyes softening. "Dad, you were never alone. You raised me, taught me right from wrong, gave me the courage to stand tall no matter what. Tonight I just stood with you. That's all a son should do." The evening breeze rustled the leaves, carrying away the last traces of fear that had hung over the house. Mr. Johnson sat back in his chair, taking a long sip of his sweet tea, savoring the quiet and the safety that now filled the space. For years he had believed that strength meant fighting alone, enduring hardship in silence. But now he realized that strength also came from standing together, protecting each other and refusing to let fear define their lives. Marcus leaned against the porch railing, scanning the empty street. "They thought they could intimidate us with fake badges and empty words," he said, his voice steady but tinged with anger. "But they forgot one important thing. We know who we are and we know our worth. No one can take that away." Mr. Johnson nodded, feeling a rush of emotion. He thought of every moment in his life where he had been underestimated, where people assumed he could be pushed around, silenced, or dismissed. He thought of the long nights working, saving, and dreaming of a better life. And now he realized that all of it had led to this moment, a moment where dignity, courage, and love had stood together on that porch. "Unshakable, son," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "All my life I fought for respect. I fought to be seen as a man, as a person worthy of dignity. And tonight, you reminded me that respect isn't given by others, it's earned by standing strong, by protecting what's yours, and by never backing down." Marcus placed his hand over his father's. "Dad, you've earned everything. And now, you don't have to fight alone anymore. You raised me to stand tall, and tonight I stood with you. That's the difference. That's what they could never understand. The street remained silent, the neighborhood calm, as if witnessing the quiet victory that had taken place. The shadows of the fake officers were gone, but the memory of their presence lingered, a reminder of how fear could appear unexpectedly. Yet the true lesson was clear. Fear loses its power when courage and love stand together. Mr. Johnson felt a tear slide down his cheek. It was not sadness, it was release, pride, and relief. For the first time in years, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He realized that life was not about hiding from threats, avoiding conflict, or staying quiet. It was about standing tall, protecting those you love, and facing the world with unwavering courage. He looked at his son and smiled, a smile filled with gratitude and love. "Marcus, tonight, you reminded me of everything I fought for, and I am proud, so proud of you." Marcus nodded, the bond between father and son stronger than ever. "And I'm proud of you, Dad, always." The night grew quieter, the stars shining above as if celebrating their unspoken victory. And on that quiet porch, father and son stood together, knowing that nothing, no threat, no fake authority, no fear, could ever break their courage, their love, or their bond. The two fake HOA men had reached the edge of the driveway when they finally stopped, realizing the situation had slipped entirely from their control. The tall one wiped his sweaty palms on his pants, avoiding Marcus's unwavering gaze. The shorter man's knees shook slightly, and he glanced nervously down the street as if hoping for an escape route that wasn't there. Their bravado had evaporated, leaving only fear and confusion in its place. Marcus didn't chase them. He didn't raise his voice. He simply watched them, calm and unyielding. His quiet authority spoke louder than any words could. He had trained to confront far worse than two men in fake uniforms. Yet even with all his experience, he recognized the power of simple courage, of standing firmly for what was right. And tonight he and his father had done exactly that. "Go," Marcus said softly, but every word carried weight. "Leave this neighborhood. Do not come back pretending to be something you're not, because next time it will not end quietly." The men swallowed hard. They took one hesitant step backward, then another, until they were finally retreating down the street. Their footsteps echoed in the quiet night, small and uncertain, as if the pavement itself could sense their failure. Their fake authority had crumbled like sandcastles under a rising tide. Mr. Johnson exhaled slowly, sinking into his porch chair. His body felt heavy with relief, his heart still racing from the adrenaline of the confrontation. He looked at his son, and for a moment words failed him. Marcus, calm yet alert, stood by his side, a protective shadow that seemed to carry the weight of the world. He had always known his son was brave, but seeing him here, protecting not only life but dignity, filled him with a sense of awe and deep pride. "You handled that perfectly," Mr. Johnson said, his voice trembling slightly. "You didn't need to shout or scare them back. Just standing there, you made them see who we are. Made them see they were wrong." Marcus leaned against the porch railing, letting the tension slip from his shoulders. "Dad, you don't need anyone to see your worth except yourself. They wanted to intimidate you, but you've always been strong. You've always been enough. I just reminded them of that." Mr. Johnson's chest swelled with emotion. For decades he had carried the quiet weight of proving himself, at work, in life, and even in his own neighborhood. So many times people had judged him unfairly, tried to make him feel small or powerless. But tonight the story had changed. Tonight courage had been visible, undeniable, and shared between father and son. He looked back down the street where the two men had disappeared, a deep sense of satisfaction settling over him. They were gone, and for the first time he felt truly safe in his own home. It wasn't just about the house or the lawn or the neighborhood. It was about dignity. It was about justice. And most importantly, it was about family. "Thank you, Marcus," he said quietly, his eyes glistening. "All these years, I thought I had to carry everything alone. But having you here, it changes everything. You reminded me that I am not weak, and that love and courage can stand against anything." Marcus smiled, a small, reassuring gesture that said everything without words. "You've never been weak, Dad. You fought battles I can't even imagine, and you taught me what strength truly is." Tonight we stood together. That's all a son could ever hope to do. The neighborhood returned to its peaceful quiet, the streetlights casting soft pools of light across the driveways. Somewhere, a dog barked in the distance, a reminder that life continued despite the confrontation. And on that small porch, father and son remained, breathing in the calm, sharing the unspoken bond forged through courage, protection, and love. Mr. Johnson leaned back, letting the evening settle around him. He knew the memory of the fake officers would fade, but the feeling of standing strong together would last forever. This night would be remembered not for fear, but for the power of family, dignity, and the quiet strength that refused to be intimidated. And Marcus knew as he glanced at his father that this was more than a victory over two men in fake badges. It was a victory over fear itself. The night was quiet again, almost sacred in its stillness. The streetlights cast gentle pools of light across the Johnsons' porch, illuminating the small garden Mr. Johnson had tended for years. Everything seemed ordinary, yet everything had changed. Father and son sat together, the weight of the evening settling into a calm that was both peaceful and profound. Mr. Johnson looked at Marcus, his eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude, pride, and emotion he could hardly put into words. "Son," he began softly, "all my life I fought to be respected, to be seen as a man in a world that often didn't see me. Tonight you reminded me that I never had to fight alone. You reminded me that courage and love are stronger than fear and lies." Marcus shook his head, smiling faintly. "Dad, it was never just me. You raised me to stand tall. You taught me what strength really is, not in muscles, not in badges, but in heart and honor. I just stood beside you. That's all any son could ever do." The old man's hand trembled slightly as he reached for his son's. He felt the warmth, the steady presence, and the bond between them stronger than ever. It was more than pride, it was recognition. A moment where everything he had endured made sense. Every struggle, every whisper, every sideways glance had led to this night, this moment of quiet victory. "They thought they could intimidate me," Mr. Johnson said, voice low, almost in awe. "They thought because I am older, because I have fought alone for so long, that I could be pushed down. But standing with you, I feel taller than I ever have. Not because of me, but because of us." Marcus's eyes softened. "Dad, fear can only control someone who lets it. You've never let it. And tonight, standing together, we turned fear into something else. Respect, dignity, courage. That's what matters. That's what they could never take from us." The crickets outside chirped softly, and a gentle wind rustled the leaves in the trees. The quietness of the neighborhood seemed like a blessing, like the world itself had paused to honor this small yet monumental victory. Mr. Johnson leaned back, letting his chest rise and fall slowly. He realized that life was not only about surviving battles, it was about living with integrity, standing for what is right, and protecting the people you love. "I used to think strength meant fighting alone," he said quietly, looking at the dark sky above. "But now I see. Strength is knowing you're not alone. Strength is standing with the people who matter, protecting each other and never letting fear define you." Marcus placed a hand on his father's shoulder, a gesture that was tender, yet filled with power. "Exactly, Dad, we protect each other. That's family. That's the bond that nothing can break. And remember this, you've taught me courage for a lifetime. That's more powerful than any badge, any rule, any threat they could ever throw at us." Mr. Johnson smiled through tears that had started to form. He realized that all the battles he had faced, at work, in life, in a world that often judged him unfairly, were nothing compared to this feeling. The peace of standing tall, the love of a family united, the strength of dignity and honor that could not be shaken. For the first time in years, he felt truly safe, not because fear had disappeared, but because courage and love had replaced it. He and Marcus had faced intimidation together, and they had won. Not with anger, not with violence, but with presence, honor, and unwavering calm. "Tonight," he said softly, "I am proud, not just of myself, but of us. And I am proud of the man you've become, Marcus. Brave, honorable, and steady. My son, my protector, my pride." Marcus smiled, a warmth spreading across his face. "And I am proud of you, Dad. Always. You raised me to be strong, and now I know that strength isn't just about what we can do. It's about who we are. And together, there's nothing we can't face." The night embraced them in its stillness, stars shining above like quiet witnesses to their victory. Father and son sat together on that porch, not just as family, but as a living testament that courage, love, and honor could overcome fear, lies, and intimidation. And in that quiet, powerful moment, they knew one truth above all: dignity cannot.